and I'm going to share my screen out and welcome you to today's community conversation. This series of what we're calling Keeping Curious, Talking Trees, co-hosted by Speak for the Trees Boston and Urban, the Boston University graduate program in urban biogeosciences and environmental health. That's a mouthful there, Evan. I am very pleased as executive director and co-founder of Speak for the Trees Boston to welcome you to this series as we explore the intersection of urban ecology and environmental justice in Boston, with a specific focus on the hard work that our urban forest does for us here in the city, and also the wonderful people who learn about it and nurture it. Today, it's my distinct honor to introduce you to both Katherine Walsh, who is Sustainability Director at Boston Public Schools and also an advisory board member at Speak for the Trees Boston, and Raquel Jimenez, who is a Ph.D. graduate student at Boston University and will be working with us as an intern this spring to do some analysis on the urban forestry in Boston. Their topic today is going to be trees in schools, improving health and learning. And in a moment, I'll turn the microphone over to Evan. You may have noticed, though, that you're muted, and we encourage you still to interact with our presenters today. This is meant to be a community conversation, although there have been people who have been Zoom bombing across the country, so we're mindful that we want to keep this a safe and respectful space. So we're trying our best to make this a public meeting while also making it a space where no one feels harassed. So please feel free to share appropriate remarks in the chat box, and we'll see how today's sessions goes. I'm also really pleased to announce we just finalized the poster, and I'll share it with you later today. Our next Keeping Curious, Talking Trees community conversation will be on Tuesday, April 21st at 3 p.m. Monday is a holiday. And that community conversation will be joined with David George Haskell, author of The Songs of Trees and a Pulitzer Prize winning author. What's his last name now? Jeff Perrin, professor at Lesley. And my dear friend Judy Foster, who is the co-founder of Hero Nurturing Center in Boston. And together they're going to explore the emotional relationship between humans and trees and what trees mean during this time of pandemic. So with that, I wanted to welcome you all. I'll be lurking in the background, and I'm going to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Evan.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. It's so exciting to be here with all of you. I'm the program manager for BU Urban. As David said, we're a PhD training program at Boston University. Pam Templer, who's also on the call, is the director. And we focus on urban biogeoscience and environmental health. There's a lot of words, but it's an expansive topic that concerns cities, city environments, and urban health. And so we're excited to partner with Speak for the Trees on this series. Today we're going to hear from our two speakers. They'll both introduce themselves. We'll have a conversation together, and then an audience Q&A, ending with a quiz bowl in which two of you will be competing to win a Speak for the Trees t-shirt. Very exciting.
I have one here to show you. Sorry to overtalk you, Evan.
Wow.
So
and not only that, but you get your own personalized size.
Lucky you. So our two speakers will be answering trivia questions on behalf of our two of you. So why don't we get started with Raquel? Tell us about who you are, how you got interested in trees and schools, health and learning, and to kick off our conversation.
Sure. Thank you so much for the introduction, Evan, David, and hi everyone. I am Raquel Jimenez. As David mentioned earlier, I am currently doing a PhD in environmental health at Boston University School of Public Health. And for those of you who might not know, environmental health, it's the area of public health that focuses on how the environment can affect the health of the population. I grew up in Chile, the funny-looking, skinny country that you can see in this picture in South America. And one of my favorite features of my homeland is that wilderness and nature are always within close reach. So I grew up in close emotional and physical proximity to nature. And since I was a kid, I have always thought of myself as an environmentalist, a nerd who's all about the environment. But as I grew up, I began to realize that you cannot really separate people from the environment. The connections are too many. We depend on nature for basically everything. So on one hand, human-related activities are devastating ecosystems all around the world, in Chile, in my hometown, in the name of progress, which as a teenager made me really, really mad. On another hand, I saw how, while some people were enjoying the benefits of economic development, others were disproportionately burdened by the negative effects of economic and industrial activity. Indigenous communities, racial minorities, the poor, classic story, which pissed me off even more. Again, I'm a teenager, I'm very mad at the world. But also, this situation kind of like broke my heart. So I became very aware of environmental justice at an early age, and this became sort of my passion and my driver for my academic pathway down the road. So accordingly, I did my undergrad in environmental engineering, and I got my master's degree in industrial engineering at Andrés Bello University in Santiago. Then I worked for a couple of years as faculty in the School of Engineering at my alma mater, where I had the opportunity to participate in research quantifying health impacts from air pollution in Santiago. Up to that point, all of my training, it's been around engineering, so nothing related to health. So I was really fascinated as to how, when you can make an explicit connection between environmental issues and health of the population based on sound, robust science, people really start paying attention. So you are able to make a very compelling case for the environment and get things done, promote change. People care a lot about health, probably more than they do about the environment for the sake of the environment. So I remember at that time, a dear colleague of mine, Pablo Ruiz, told me, oh, this thing that you just discovered and that you're really into has a name, and it's called environmental health. You should go get your PhD on this stuff. So next year, my husband and I moved to Boston to start, and I started my PhD at Boston University with environmental justice like still being at the core of my heart and my research interest. As you can see in these pictures of me protesting social environmental justice in Chile down by Harvard Square in October last year. During my PhD, I joined the urban training program, where I learned even more about the superpowers of urban vegetation, how it could improve the environment, people's health, and also learn more about its potential to moderate social inequalities in cities. And so it just made complete sense to me at that point. Now my dissertation work, it's all about urban vegetation, environmental justice, and its link to children's health. And more specifically, how does exposure to vegetation can improve children's learning, which is what we're gonna be discussing today with Katherine. So many observational and experimental studies suggest that vegetation can aid cognitive development in children, boost learning, and actually improve academic performance, as in help them get better grades. And I'll be touching on the science behind these later on, but so for now, I just wanted to share my thoughts as to why I believe that greening intervention in schools are such a fantastic idea. So we know that school education has a lasting impact on people's quality of life, health, and future incomes, which are major determinants of the skills and opportunities for people to live healthy, prosperous lives. And while the main focus on what are the drivers of school performance has been placed on traditional factors such as school characteristics and parental socioeconomic status, there is a growing and renewed interest in the role that vegetation and other environmental factors in schools can play on academic achievement. And why is this? There are many reasons, and I'm just going to name a few. So first of all, contact with nature at early stages of life can play a very crucial and irreplaceable role on brain development. Green spaces and natural environments in general provide children with unique opportunities such as inciting risk-taking, discovery, creativity, improving sense of wonder, sense of self, and enhancing psychological restoration, which combine all of these positively influence cognitive development. But opportunities with for interaction with nature in urban settings in cities are increasingly being limited. So vegetation within school grounds can really help filling this need. Second, because school-age children are still going through rapid, intense brain development, and because they spend most of their active hours in school grounds, it's very important to protect children from harmful exposures like air pollution or noise that can adversely affect maturation of cognitive functions such as memory and attention, which are fundamental for academic achievement and learning. And guess what? Vegetation in school grounds can provide, to some extent, that protection by improving environmental quality within school grounds.
Raquel, that's
finally, school education, I believe its role should be providing the tools and opportunities for social mobility. But for the most part, it is just perpetuating pre-existing socioeconomic and racial disparities, not only in the United States, in Chile, but in many, many countries of the world. And so upgrading infrastructure or like moving school locations, increasing numbers of teachers are very expensive interventions, and some of them are like straight out just like not even feasible. So grading interventions, on the other hand, are relatively inexpensive and can bring mental and health benefits for children and the rest of the community while boosting learning and helping kids get better grades. And so I like to think that a healthy school environment can to some extent compensate for the less than ideal environmental conditions at home, especially of the most disadvantaged students, and help moderate both short-term inequalities in academic achievement and long-term inequalities in the future stages of life. So I think this is something that we should be doing already.
Raquel, that's a great intro and a great segue to Katherine, who is working on exactly those topics. So Katherine, I'll let you introduce yourself. Tell us how you got interested in this work and what you're doing now.
Sure. Thank you so much to David, Evan, Raquel for having me here with you today. And I just want to give a special shout out to all the members of Friends of the Boston Schoolyards who I saw who joined us today. I grew up in Boston. I'm a graduate of Boston Public Schools myself. I went to Boston Latin School. Really growing up, I initially was more interested in the environment and towards of zoology. But when I was in high school, I had some teachers who started kind of making me see the connections more between the environment and public health people. And that's really where, like Raquel, I just started developing this passion for environmental justice and knew that I wanted to move away more from zoology and more towards environmentalism. So I went to Boston College for undergrad and really transformed my identity during that time from being mainly an athlete most of my life to now being an activist and really using my campus as a living learning lab for sustainability and pushing sustainability at college. And when I graduated, the economy wasn't in the best place, but I wanted to stay in that pathway and look for jobs in sustainability and higher education. I would also be remiss not to mention an amazing summer job I had while I was a college student, and that was with the city of Boston and at the time what was known as the Urban Ecology Institute and Greater Boston Urban Forest Coalition. And you can see this picture here up at the top, where myself and about 19 other college students hired by Urban Ecology Institute to conduct a citywide tree inventory, street tree inventory for Boston. And even though I grew up in Boston, I think it can be so neighborhood based. You can often be in your own neighborhood bubble. And this job really opened my eyes to Boston in a whole new way, just connecting me more directly with residents from different neighborhoods, with city officials, and just really pointing out the disparities between neighborhoods and why certain neighborhoods have more green space and trees than others, and the kind of social, economic, and health inequities that come along with that. So that was just really transformative job experience for me, in addition to my college experience just as a student leader. And thankfully, a few years after I graduated, I got an amazing opportunity to work for the University of California, Berkeley, as a sustainability staff member. And my primary role when I first started was running their campus green fund. Basically, it was a student fee-based fund solely for the purpose of funding campus sustainability projects. So as you can see, there's a number of projects we got to fund, everything from solar to zero waste systems. We did a student-run food cooperative from the campus, completely student-run business. And then one of the special projects we have funded was the first ever Student Environmental Resource Center at UC Berkeley. UC Berkeley had over 4 organizations just dedicated to sustainability issues, but we didn't have a central hub to bring that all together and really support and empower student leadership and voice. And so we founded this center, and I became the director of that center. After 2 years of doing that, I just really missed Boston. I love Boston. Boston is my home, and I wanted to take what I learned at the leading university back here to the city that I love and get involved. And I was so involved at Berkeley that when I came back here, again, even though I grew up here, I felt like I needed to relearn the community, what had changed in my 7 years of being gone, and who were the organizations and people that were leading on this effort. And so thankfully I found out about Speak for the Trees, and that's one of the organizations I've been able to get involved with in my time here. And I should also, lastly, just mention, as David mentioned, I work as the sustainability manager for Boston Public Schools. And a lot of my work the last 3 years has been focused on primarily environment, health, and safety issues, just because of the age of our buildings and the progress we need to make in some areas like drinking water, for example. But I feel probably the most hopeful I've ever felt recently in terms of where we're getting support and investments from our new superintendent and Mayor Walsh. That I think now a lot of my time is going to be able to shift more to things like sustainability curriculum, student leadership, and hopefully outdoor education. So Raquel, I wanted to ask you, because I want to hear more about your work, could you sort of talk about what types of questions are researchers investigating in order to link urban green space with health? And in particular, if you could talk about how green space might involve or impact children's learning.
Oh, David, I think you need to unmute Raquel.
Oh, geez. All right, where is Raquel? I have to find her now. Oh, because she's not one of the co-hosts.
Wait, never mind, I did it, sorry.
All right.
Oh, wait, and then I muted her again. Okay, David, I'm gonna unmute her. Don't unmute her too. Sorry, everyone. Unmute.
It's a very professional operation here.
Unmute audio. Well, I wonder why it's not working.
It's not working for me either.
Strange. Well, why
Raquel,
don't we?
do you want to? Can you?
I just unmute. Oh.
I bet it's because we have 3 people trying to unmute.
There we go.
We got it. Thank you.
All right. Do we need to repeat the question, or you remember it?
Please, Katherine, can you repeat the
Sure.
question for me?
Could you just talk about what types of questions are researchers asking or investigating in order to look at the links between urban green space and public health? And particularly if you could talk about also how that might impact children's learning.
Of course. And David, can we fast forward to the next slide, please? That's perfect. So that is a great question. And I wanted to start by first providing sort of a general overview of the health benefits from urban vegetation and how is this magic like actually happening. So there is mounting evidence showing positive relationships between exposure to green spaces and vegetation, natural spaces, and overall mental and physical health. And there are many hypothesized pathways by which vegetation brings these health benefits to people, but the mechanisms are not fully understood. This is what we know so far. So first, vegetation can reduce harmful exposures that are known to be detrimental for health. For example, vegetation can reduce levels of air pollution, can moderate ambient temperature and reduce heat exposure, and can also mitigate noise. Second, contact with nature and green spaces can reduce stress, can improve a sense of general well-being, and replenish cognitive capacities such as attention and memory. And finally, green spaces encourage physical activity and provide physical space, a platform for community building and social interaction. So basically, by reducing harm, restoring capacities, and building capacities, contact with vegetation improves health. And this is particularly relevant in cities, because again, we have very limited opportunities for interaction with nature and vegetation in urban spaces. And so while these benefits are enjoyed by the entire population, they can be particularly relevant for children because, as I mentioned earlier, childhood, it's a period of rapid development, especially for the brain. And this is really the underlying basis of the hypothesis that exposure to vegetation, particularly in schools, can boost learning and improve academic performance in children. Can we go to the next slide, David? Thank you. The main argument for this hypothesized link between vegetation and learning is grounded on two well-established psychoevolutionary theories that refer to the ancient relationship, the ancient connection of humans and natural environments during our evolution as species. Stress reduction theory, or SRT, and attention restoration theory, or ART. So SRT proposes that vegetation can evoke positive changes in psychological state, reducing negative emotions and promoting stress recovery more rapidly than it would happen compared to contact with built environments. On the other hand, ART postulates that exposure to natural environments and vegetation can improve cognitive function through the restoration of directed attention, which is the type of attention that we use when we're required to focus on a task that requires actual effort, like sitting in a classroom and learning mathematics. And in the previous slide, we learned about how the protective effect of vegetation against air pollution, noise, and heat, all of which have been shown to negatively affect cognitive development and performance. And so in summary, vegetation in schools leads to positive states of mental and physical health that in turn are going to be facilitating learning. So happy, relaxed, healthy children do better in school. The children who are stressed, unhappy, and sick. And this notion is like really, really intuitive. But we as scientists can't really rely on intuition and common sense. So David, can we go to the next slide, please? I wanted to share with you the result of a fantastic, well-designed longitudinal study that was developed in the city of Barcelona. This is a personal favorite of mine, where researchers enrolled a really pretty large number of children from many schools within the Barcelona metro area. So for each student, researchers collected a ton of information about parents, residential neighborhoods, and their schools, and measured the amount of vegetation at home, along their commuting routes from home to schools, and within school grounds using satellite data. They follow these children for a year, measuring cognitive performance 4 times every 3 months using computer-based word and numeric tests, looking specifically at memory and attention to assess changes over time, and then see if there were any differences in cognitive development by greenness exposure levels. The results indicate that children with higher vegetation levels at home, commuting routes, and schools show greater progress in cognitive development, even after controlling for socio-demographic characteristics of parents, children, and schools. But the strongest associations were observed for school vegetation. And as we can see in this beautiful plot, with working memory score on the y-axis, where the higher the better, and visit or time on the x-axis, we can see how children in the high vegetation school group in green showed more progress in working memory over the course of a year compared to the low vegetation school group in orange. And remember that this is after controlling socioeconomic status, so it's taking account those differences that can be attributed to race, income, etc. Pretty cool, right? I hope I make a very convincing case for this. Now, I have a question for you, Katherine. And basically, when we as researchers are thinking about greenness in schools and how can we improve academic scores, we often do so at a very broad scale, regional, municipal, and usually just on paper. So it's really hard to appreciate and grasp all the local effort that goes into actually making a school more green. So I wanted to ask you, what is it like to work on greening schools in Boston? Like, how does this actually happen? Can you tell us a little bit about this in your experience?
Absolutely. It's a great question. So David, if you could go to the next slide. So one of the key parts to this, first and foremost, is collaboration. We could not green our schools and our schoolyards without collaboration. And even when I was putting this slide together, I kept thinking of partners that have helped us green our schoolyards and are helping us with outdoor teaching and learning. So these are our primary partners, and I really want to especially call out, as I did before, of the Boston Schoolyards. They are the legacy group of members from the original Boston Schoolyard Initiative that took place from 1994 to 2013. And that initiative was a partnership between community members, foundations, City of Boston, BPS, basically revitalizing our schoolyards at BPS. So they revitalized 88 schoolyards, built 35 new, what we refer to as outdoor classrooms. And we look to them, we partner with them in order to help us coordinate a lot of these other partners that you see here, mentioned here. And so if we want to go in the next slide, the way we look at, I would think about outdoor teaching and learning is, again, thanks to our partners, we're able to almost look at it as the schoolyard as a living learning lab, and then as well as our city as a living learning lab. So thanks to, again, Friends of the Boston Schoolyards, City Sprouts, Green City Growers, Boston Water and Sewer, even group partners like Love Your Block or funding like the Community Preservation Act, we are able to do a number of things actually at our schoolyards so that all students need to do is walk up to the schoolyard with their teacher and utilize the schoolyard for their learning. So we have here some freight farms that we're utilizing. The green stormwater infrastructure that you see here in the middle, we have 5 sites there at 5 of our schools. That was funded in partnership with Boston Water and Sewer. And thanks to the science department, BPS Science, they developed actual curriculum to even go along with utilizing those 5 sites for learning. But I think what's most important here is that history of working with the Boston Schoolyard Initiative and incorporating hands-on experimental learning for students so that they get a chance to be outside. And it's not just science. I think that's a key message that we always share, even in Friends of the Boston Schoolyards. It can be math, arts, English language, ELA, history, physical education is really key. And I think what's great is BPS actually incorporates the importance of schoolyards even in its district wellness policy under healthy school environments and physical education. And if we want to go on to the next slide. David, sorry.
Yeah, is it there?
Now
I switched it. Okay. There's a little bit of a delay.
one of the special initiatives that I wanted to highlight is and I should pause to also say, we have Green City growers in about 8 or 9 schools that are funded through a Target grant. But we also have this program with USDA that we got a farm to school implementation grant, $100,000 grant to do with Green City growers and BPS Strive with our special education students. We also have City Sprouts at 9 schools. They're also doing garden education with teachers and students as well. So what you see here in these pictures is photos from our USDA grant. And basically, this is just one example of that schoolyard as a living learning lab. And we have 4 high schools programs representing Strive students. And they built at 4 different locations, 1 high school, 1 middle school, 2 elementary schools, 4 4x8 raised garden beds at each of those locations. So they worked with Green City growers to actually build those beds that you're seeing, fill them with soil. They went through hands-on training in order how to build those beds. They did some classwork as well to learn about gardening and plants. And once we're able to be back at the schools, because things are a little bit on hold right now, as you know, they will actually be getting the opportunity to plant in those beds, maintain those beds, share the knowledge that they're learning with the elementary students that are at the schools where the beds have been built. It's just an incredible example again of how we could not do outdoor teaching and learning without critical partners and without some creative thinking coming together.
Catherine, thank you for showing us
Sure.
those pictures and telling us about these really inspirational partners, and I hope we'll hear from more of them in our upcoming series. I did want to ask you a question from the audience for you about how these grounds are maintained, especially I'm sure a lot of people are wondering right now while we're maintaining physical distance, who's keeping our schoolyards green and what's that like for them?
Yes, so there's a combination of the grounds in general. Our schoolyards are maintained by facilities management at BPS, and we have a grounds crew. And also as part of facilities are custodial staff. So custodians are responsible for keeping our grounds clear of trash, also trained in dealing with sharps and needles, and we have a really strict process on that. Unfortunately, that's a reality we have to deal with in some of our schoolyards. They deal with mowing, picking up leaves. We also have a landscape architect on contract we can call in when we need more expert guidance around the types of plants so that we're not inadvertently down or removing something that should actually be there as part of the learning. But what I should also mention, and I'll talk about more in our hopes for the future, is teachers and students, the schools themselves, also part of that in the sense that we want part of the learning to be actually the growing, the planting, the maintaining. So you have to get away from this assumption that it's just all on facilities. Again, it goes back to that collaboration part, that part of the learning is actually being involved in the maintaining as well. And I think where we still need to do some work is identifying all the champions at every school so that we have good communication between facilities and the school health, as well as identifying a sustainable budget to do all this work so that we can actually provide tools, soil, plants to schools to get involved with this so that they're not always reliant on one-off grants, which again is not sustainable for building processes and programs that last.
That's a great kind of, as you scale out from school to larger support systems, I know you had a few more pictures you wanted to show us on the city as a living lab. Do you want to just say something briefly about that concept as your kind of hope for the future? And then I'll have a question or two for Raquel.
Sure. So I think one of the other beautiful things about our partnerships is from groups like Boston Nature Center, Arnold Arboretum, and Thompson Island Outward Bound Education. Those are three critical partners that actually host students at their location. So we're not only just using our schoolyards for outdoor teaching and learning, we're using the urban environment, our own neighbors, our own backyard to also experience that. And again, if you grow up in Boston, you may or may not have your own yard, but ideally you have all of these other resources in the city that we just need to make sure our students are having access to them and realize that those spaces are there for them. And I think that's an equity issue we're constantly dealing with, is how do we make sure that all of our students feel that the outdoor spaces that we have are there for them to enjoy, to learn, to access. So I'll leave it at that.
Equity is a great transition to ask Raquel a question about who has access to greenness. And as we're trying to understand how children benefit from greenness, this question of access and difference matters a lot. And so some questions we've had in the chat are about how scientifically we account for race or socioeconomic status or geography in order to understand how people benefit from greenness, whether that's statistically or experimentally. Can you talk to that for a little bit?
Sure, and I think that's a fantastic question, because I think it's common knowledge how socioeconomic, sociodemographic status, it's both strongly correlated with the amount of vegetation that surrounds, people's homes and neighborhoods, but it's also one of the major determinants of, like, in this case, school performance. And so in this type of studies, like observational and experimental studies, when we say that we are controlling for sociodemographic characteristics, say income, race, ethnicity, parental education, etc., we mean controlling for in a very statistical, like technical sense. So this means that we're including these characteristics, again, income, race, ethnicity, parental education, as variables in our models. And what these variables are going to be doing is basically taking away all the variability in our outcome, say school grades or academic achievement or standardized test scores that can be attributed to sociodemographics, to these characteristics, so that we're only looking at the increase or decrease, the change in school grades or cognitive development, whatever the outcome of interest is, that can be attributed solely to the different levels of vegetation exposure. So this way, the results of this type of models that we're getting are really, can be expressed as like change of X% in school grades or academic achievement, that it's associated to a given known change in vegetation exposure. And so in talking about, causality, or like how much can we believe to these numbers, it's actually one of the major challenges in this literature, because I can't remember if I mentioned this before or not. This is a very young literature, so there are not a lot of studies, and I'd say like the major limitation of the current literature is the type of data that it's available to researchers. So usually researchers, due to privacy issues, and this is sensitive data, right? It's kids' grades, again, socioeconomic backgrounds, like very sensitive information. Researchers, for the most part, only have access to aggregated level data, so school level data, or even like municipality aggregated level data, which makes it really hard to get at that question, address at that question of causality.
So I want to be mindful of time here. We still have a quiz bowl to do, and wanted to share some things out. I'm struck actually by this other issue. So we talked today about kids, but what might be the effects on an adult living in or experiencing more green space? And I'm especially struck by it as we deal with more and more of us having harder time accessing perhaps green space, depending on where we're sequestering ourselves. So, you know, perhaps on a normal work week, you might be able to go to a park or you might be able to go for a jog. For many of us, that space is either too far away or feels too dangerous. I'm wondering, you know, how does the immediacy of the green space we encounter day to day affect us as adults as well as youth, right? I think although youth minds tend to be more malleable, there might be benefits for us too. I'm wondering if there's research on that, Raquel, or if, you know, Katherine, if you know of any.
Yeah, so like that's not my area of expertise, but I've come across those like many studies looking at that. So there is some evidence, for example, linking just neighborhood level vegetation. So not specifically parks, right? So this includes streets, trees, and gardens, neighborhood level vegetation to reduce incidence of cognitive, like degenerative diseases. I'm thinking like, you know, like dementia, Alzheimer's disease. There's also what I mentioned earlier about how vegetation can reduce stress levels and replenish cognitive capacities. That's also valid for the adult population as well. And in that specific case, contact with vegetation is not only referring to going, you know, to a park, hugging a tree. That means that, I mean, there are studies that prove that even views of greeneries through our windows can induce, like Evan is showing right now, or plants in our desks. Just the views of greeneries through our windows can all have a big impact on our mental state. And again, so parks are fantastic, but definitely it's not the only form of urban green space that we need to boost the population, the health of the population.
This is a great transition to our quiz bowl because our questions actually concern the kind of value of nature. So David, if you could go to the first question slide. How this is gonna work.
Do I have to refresh it, Evan?
Oh, hopefully not. Does it not show for you if you advance more?
It's there. It's there. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, little drum roll, please.
So how this will work is Raquel and Katherine are playing on behalf of two of you that have submitted questions, Larry Rapskin and Phoebe.
All right.
And so I'll read you the question. I'll ask you both to answer it. I'll reveal the answer, and whoever gets more right, that player will win a shirt. So Katherine, you'll be playing on behalf of Larry, and Raquel, you'll be playing on behalf of Phoebe. So
I just want to give a quick shout out here to Larry. He has been a wonderful supporter of our work at Speak for the Trees. Hello, Larry, a wonderful photographer in his own right. Phoebe, I don't know if we've met before, but thank you for joining us today. And Evan, you ready?
Ready. Go to the first question.
Who's going to be answering first?
We'll have Katherine answer first.
All right, Katherine.
You'll both answer both questions, but I won't tell you the answer until you both done it. Okay.
All right, here we go.
Katherine, according to a study by the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation, every $1 spent on a New York City street tree generated how much in benefits? Is it A, $5.60, B, $1.75, or C, $25.50? What do you think what is your answer? Raquel, I want you to start thinking of it too. You'll give your answer after. Did you say this?
While Katherine thinks here, I just want to, you got the little timer going. Urban Forest, if you haven't read it, by Jill Jones, is a wonderful book. Boston plays a prominent role in that book. I suggest you pick it up. She'll actually be a good speaker, Evan, for one of our series.
Sounds great. All right, what do you think, Katherine?
A and C, so I'll just go with A.
All right, what do you think, Raquel?
I'm going for C.
All right, Raquel's optimistic. The answer is A, $5.60. So
First
point to Katherine.
All right, we're up now, Katherine. What happens, Evan? Oh, we'll get there in a minute. We'll have Raquel answer the next question. Go ahead, Evan.
All right, Raquel, you'll answer first. Question 2, approximately how many tons of air pollution do urban trees in the lower 48 states remove from the atmosphere annually? What do you think? A, 1.5 million tons, B, 784,000 tons, or C, depends on annual weather conditions?
I can't help to go into like all the details, like What air pollution are we talking about? But whatever, I'll just throw my answer. So all the trees in the lower 48 states, I'm gonna go with 1.5 million.
A for Raquel. And Catherine, what do you say?
I'll just go B, just to be different.
All right. Well, Catherine, you have it again.
Wow.
Too optimistic.
Maybe more pessimistic is what it is.
Evan, should we just call it a game? I mean, there's no way Raquel could come back, is there?
I think we should still read the last question because
Should we
it's
still read the last question?
Yeah.
All right. Here
Okay.
we go.
Catherine, you'll get to.
I don't have it. Oh, there we go.
Catherine, you answer this first. This is a question from Phoebe. So Phoebe wants to know what tree she planted in her backyard this past weekend. A, dogwood. B, redbud. Or C, river birch. What do you think, Catherine?
I'll go with A, dogwood.
And Raquel?
I'm gonna go with the river birch.
Oh, it's B, redbud.
Oh, thank you for pointing on. So funny that this is a wonderful transition. So first of all, congratulations, Catherine and Larry. Larry, I'll come by your house one day and drop you off a shirt. What size do you take?
Well, I'll
You
email
don't
Larry.
have to tell me.
That.
We'll
Yeah.
talk later, Larry. This is a wonderful transition to some of the work we're doing today, this month at Speak for the Trees. So we're going to wrap up in a minute, but here is a brief event coming up with, like I mentioned, David George Haskell, Judith Foster, and Jeff Perrin will be joining us, and I'm going to include, if I can here, let me see if I can do this, a link to
Or we can just drop that in the chat.
yeah, I don't know if I can.
I can do that.
So while Evan gets that together, I just wanted to share with folks that we are also giving away trees to residents of Boston. And out of the trees we're giving, Phoebe, you chose 3 of the 6 trees we're going to be giving away. So we're going to be giving away flowering dogwoods. We're going to be giving away eastern redbuds, and someone just asked for the species of that. I can't remember, it's Candylus canadia, I think, perhaps. We can look it up. It's a beautiful tree that flowers early in the spring before it leaves out with these small little almost red purpley flowers that are all over the branches, and then the leaves are these almost heart-shaped leaves. Beautiful native tree, and produces this fruit that I think is, there we go. Drew just answered, thank you. Cercis canadensis. Beautiful tree. We're also going to be giving out river birch. We're providing residents with Yoshino cherries, with red oaks, and with willow oaks. All wonderful trees, and we're doing it in 2 ways. We're going to be delivering trees to residents' homes in Hyde Park, and you can find out more about our work at sfttbos.org, where you can even register to receive a tree. We're collecting your name and address, and we'll either be hand delivering to you, to your door, a 5-gallon tree, and we're also partnering with Arbor Day to mail to you a 1-gallon tree. These are trees that come potted. So we hope that you can be part of this work. I think, like our speakers shared with us today, having trees right near your home is of immense cognitive benefit, let alone eco and environmental benefit. So we hope that you can join us in these efforts as Earth Day approaches, as Arbor Day approaches, and as we work together to develop a more robust and healthy urban forest for all of us in Boston.
So the event is in the chat. We'll hope to see you next time, and let's all give a virtual round of applause to Catherine and Raquel. And
then,
thank you all for coming.
Yeah, before you leave, I'm going to launch a quick poll, 5 or 6 questions. If you could just quickly answer those. I don't know if it's on your screen. Love to get some feedback. And if you have any feedback that you could share with us, feel free to either email me or Evan. And we look forward to seeing you next week for a wonderful talk with, like I said, David George Haskell, Judith Foster, and Jeff Perrin, as we explore the idea of how we can connect to trees and each other during a global pandemic. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.